the only thing running through my mind, other than the sheer panic, was I'm going to die. That was the moment that I was going to die. We was due to go to Basra in the April of 2005, and it'd been a year or two since we initially went into Iraq. So tempers were still a bit frayed and it was still a bit hairy at times. Our regiment was being split between Basra and Al Amara, and we were going to support the Coldstream Guards in Basra in the city centre. It was going to be a summer tour, so summer in Basra was very, very hot. And at the time, going there, just turned 18, so I was allowed to go, because for a while I was questioning whether I'd be too young, wouldn't be allowed to go, still 17. But actually getting there, it was my first real sort of like taste of adventure. It was exactly what I joined up for, to go out, help people, experience new lands. It was great. Normally, our day-to-day sort of operational duties while in Basra were to patrol and guard like our bases, and be on a quick reaction force where if anything was happening to people who was either on patrol or anything in the local area, we could be mobilised to move within minutes. And it was during one of these periods of time where we were on QRF, the Quick Reaction Force, that we heard of a sort of like a riot bubbling up at one of the police stations local in town. Details were drip feeding through, but what we did know at the time was we're going to go there, we're going to support this operation because quite a large crowd's forming, something's happened at the prison, and we need to go there to support. When we all kitted up, and one of my job roles was to be a gunner in these warrior armoured vehicles. They're huge. They look like tanks. They're basically 26-ton vehicles. They've got cannons on the front. If you looked at them, you'd see a tank. But they carried people in the back as well. But my job role was to be a gunner in the turret, to operate the weapon systems. So half the time I'd be sleeping in there anyway, so all my kit was ready to go, and we just rolled out. When we eventually got onto the scene, we discovered that there were 2 SAS soldiers had effectively been taken captive and being held in this prison. At the time I didn't know the details behind the story, but what I did know was there were 2 of our colleagues in there. There's quite a large, nasty crowd forming, and we're going to support other SAS guys going in there to retrieve them. And that was effectively the day that I got injured. But as we roll in, there's people on the ground, our troops on the ground, there's a hostile crowd on the ground, there's the prison. There's a lot going on. It's quite a dangerous situation, but being an 18-year-old soldier who trained and looked forward to this sort of opportunity, I suppose, to do some real work where we could save people, make a difference. It was quite exciting. Obviously aware of the danger, but as an 18-year-old who just won Best Recruit, going through training, I felt invincible. It felt like nothing could touch me. I was in an armoured vehicle. I was highly trained and ready to do anything. So actually rolling on scene, looking through the sights of my warrior through the periscopes, it was quite intimidating. But like I said, at the same time, it was exciting. There was lots of people there. There was obviously a very angry crowd, but also mixed in with that angry crowd was general spectators, children running about. It was quite, there was a lot going on. We was on scene, the prison was there. We had our guys and girls on our side, and almost like the crowd and the rioters on the other side. And it was sort of, you could feel the tension rising, it was bubbling up. There was the 2 captured SAS guys in the prison. It was, something was going to happen. You could see the kids running around, and then when something was about to happen, they'd disappear. So it was bubbling over, and then it was almost like, obviously we're not there to harm like civilians. We don't want to harm anyone. So they were sort of like getting more and more confident. They were getting closer. They were closing the lines a little bit more. And looking out at that scene, it was really hard, because you got rioters, but at the same time you've got just general spectators. There was children running around. That almost like gave them confidence to push further and further, where they got to a point where they was really close. They were within striking range, really. They were throwing bricks. There was the occasional small arms fire. Then all of a sudden there was petrol bombs. They got close enough to really damage, like, not the Warrior itself, they're really hardy pieces of kit, but the periscopes that I used to look out of as a gunner, they were completely shattered. Couldn't see through them at all. And to be able to manoeuvre the Warrior, you need to see where you're going. So every now and again we'd pop our heads out just to look at where we are. We don't want to unintentionally run someone over, their side or ours. But that's just where sort of like it just started to escalate to the point where they were close enough, and then out of nowhere someone just managed to get a direct hit with a petrol bomb right above my head, down into the hatch where I was sitting. It was almost very, very scripted. It was like our sights got taken out, open up the hatches, all of a sudden got hit by a petrol bomb. In that time frame, from what I can remember, there was so much happening on the outside, but then on the inside, when I got hit, none of that mattered, because it's hard to explain the moment that I got set on fire, because nothing makes sense. It's almost like all manner of control was completely stripped. Like, I had no ability to make any functional decisions at all. The only thing running through my mind, other than the sheer panic, was, I'm going to die. That was the moment that I was going to die. I was flailing about, and it's weird because, like, being on fire, like, you don't freeze because your body's natural instinct is to try and put the fire out. Absolutely no control of how that's done. And all that ended up happening really was I was just making it worse. I was completely covered in fire, petrol soaked through my clothes. I was using my bare hands to try and beat out the fire. In reality, that didn't make sense. I was just making my hands worse. I was making the damage worse. I was confined to the turret of the Warrior, so I was bouncing around inside. And it was so really quite stupid looking back on it, that if I wanted to reduce the damage being done to me, I just needed to get out the Warrior. But during those 25 seconds of being on fire, that thought didn't even occur to me because I had no control. I don't know what hit, I don't know what changed my mind. I think it was like adrenaline had died down a little bit and then pain became prevalent. But as soon as like I got just the slightest bit of control of myself, I realised that I did need to get out of the Warrior, to pull myself out, go up through the turret and escape this sort of oven, because fire encased in metal, it was just getting hotter and hotter. So in that moment, now really feeling the pain, I gripped onto the Warrior, this burning metal, and just heaved myself out. If I'm honest, it was the most strenuous, hardest thing I've ever done. But I almost forced myself out into the air, still on fire. I remember my communication headset snapping as what was attached to my helmet, sort of almost rolling and falling out of the Warrior, and then just hitting the ground. So hard that it sort of knocked the wind out of me. And I just lay there then. I thought that's all I can do. Like I'd exhausted myself to the point where I used to feel like I was extremely fit and healthy, but in that moment in time, that took so much energy to sort of step back and come away from dying that I had nothing left to give. I lay on the floor and I was aware of like noises going on around me. I could feel the grains of sand on my burned hands as I was trying to steady myself. And it was only my colleagues who come out the back of the Warrior. They had a fire extinguisher ready. They doused the flames and they carried me to an ambulance waiting further back. Did I really sort of like my thoughts get in line and realise what happened? And like I looked down at myself and it was a mess. In the end I ended up having 37% of my body burned of 3rd degree and full thickness burns, which is burns that have gone way past the 3 layers of skin and into muscle. So yeah, that moment I felt comfortable knowing that I weren't going to die in that moment, but that's because I knew that I got a long road ahead of me. And waiting in the back of that ambulance for a Kazivac, a helicopter, to come and take me out was like the longest 15-20 minutes of my life. The pain of being burnt then, so after actually being on fire, it's indescribable. It really is. I was chucked into the back of an ambulance. My tattered clothes were cut off, and the clearly damaged parts were my hands. I remember seeing it's almost like melted candle wax on my hands, and just how my skin looked. But the deep recesses in like my biceps where they'd caught a lot of damage, my inner thighs, where it went really deep, they sort of, the medics on the ambulance put cold compress bandages on, had morphine delivered straight away. And at that moment I was, begging and pleading for more pain relief. Obviously they couldn't give me more, but it was almost sort of like waiting for the original pain relief to settle in, using these cold compress bandages to sort of protect from any of the, the dust and the haze and everything that's in the outside environment from getting into my wounds. And it was waiting really for that helicopter to come, get me to the hospital back in our base, and have real sort of medical treatment delivered. So it was like a waiting game really. There was only so much they could do for me. But one of the things that they did do, what I remember, and the medics' phrasing just always stuck with me, was they were pouring sort of tepid water over me. And I remember one of the medics just saying that I'm essentially cooking and they just need to bring my body heat back down, not shock it down with freezing water, because then that could have like had other medical implications. But they were pouring this tepid water over me just to sort of bring my core temperature down slowly, because they didn't want to risk me going into any sort of shock. As a 18-year-old, previously thought I was invincible, and then just lying in the back of an ambulance looking at the wreckage of my body, it was quite hard to deal with. There was so much going through my head, where, 18, prime of my life, in the military, trying to do the job that I was meant to do. And then I knew full well that, burn injuries, they're lifelong, they're really difficult to come back from, and it was just a lot to try and process at the time. To try and see any future. Unfortunately, I couldn't really pay too much attention to the future because the amount of sort of pain, what was keeping me in that present moment, was so intense that whenever my mind did start to wonder about what am I going to do, like it didn't matter because I was immediately brought back to that present time where I was just looking at my body and I was in such a state that, if I'm honest, I don't think I wanted to think too much into the future at that time. Like I say, it was, as an 18-year-old, there's so much going on. I was confused more than anything, confused and hurt, and I didn't know where I was going from there. I was properly rudely awakened by the rotors of the aircraft as I was left that safety of the ambulance. The rotors were still going. It ripped all the bandages off me, because these cold compressed bandages, they weren't wrapped on, they were just placed on. Then all the dust and the sand and everything just like bit in and flew into all my wounds. That sort of like brought me back to attention, and that's how I remember going to the hospital. It felt like seconds that the helicopter had touched down again, and I was being stretchered from the helicopter to inside the hospital. And what I did remember was, because my feet weren't burnt, when I had my boots taken off, I do remember a needle being placed into my foot for like a drip there. I remember that. And then I just remember a mask being placed over my face, and then I was out cold then. When I did wake up, it was, like, unbeknownst to me, it was 10 days later. I'd been placed in an induced coma, and I'd been transported back to Selly Hoke Hospital in Birmingham. Again, that was a strange one, waking up after 10 days after injury. I felt comfortable, and I knew that I was in hospital. There was none of this sort of questioning whether I was dreaming, or none of this questioning if I was like being injured or not. I knew I was injured, so I knew I was in hospital. My way of thinking has always been very realistic, very logical. So I knew the course of events had led me to hospital. And because I remembered the entire incident, I think in the long run it has helped me mentally, because I remember everything that happened to my injury. There were no periods of time where I blacked out, so that means there's no holes in my memory for me to like fill it with even worse things. I know being set on fire is worse enough, but I think being able to recall and remember everything that happened to me during one of the most horrific times of my life has actually better prepared me in the long run to remain mentally strong. So sitting in the hospital, waking up after 10 days, I was like, yep, this is it. Let's just crack on, carry on, move forward. Well, it was explained to me that I'd suffered 37% burns to my entire body. And it was explained that they measure 1% of your body through the size of the palm of your hand. So that was quite eye-opening. I ended up having the worst parts of my body that were burnt were my hands, primarily because I was trying to beat out the fire and when I was gripping onto that burning metal of the warrior. Also, my arms, the full length of both of my arms were burnt. The inner part of my biceps got quite badly damaged. My thighs, they had taken quite a beating, and my face got burnt as well. So I had some initial burns when I inside my mouth when the petrol bomb first hit inside the warrior. Luckily at the time I didn't notice because of what was going on, but I took one huge inhale of breath and held my breath when I was inside the warrior. That helped stop any sort of real internal damage. But yeah, my face, my mouth, my nose, my forehead. Luckily, my hair was saved because I was wearing a helmet. My ears were saved because I was wearing ear defenders. And very lucky, my eyes and my eyelids, they were come away unharmed. But it was quite extensive damage where while I was in that 10-day coma, there was 2 really long sort of like between 10 and 12 hour operations that the doctors, I can only imagine, worked tirelessly on me, where they were putting skin grafts in places that really needed them, in the deepest parts of my burns. And then when I did wake up, that was the beginning of a 5-year, a process that lasts even up until now, where I had to have surgery, then rehab, and then recovery, because the nature of burn injuries is they're always changing. My hands are always changing. Whenever a scar or an injury heals, it scars over, and one of the natural sort of like issues with scarring is it pulls really tight as it tries to heal. And now having the palms of my hands as just gigantic scars, naturally they pull into a fist. So it was just a really long battle to try and combat that. But surgery itself is you're making scars, so it was a bit of a hard cycle, but it's the cost of staying alive. In my mind, I still thought there was a chance of me going back to my original role as an infantryman in the army. As time progressed and I really sort of learned and understood the capabilities that my body had now, or more so the limitations of what my body had, it was becoming quite apparent that I'd never really go back to being an infantryman. And I think what helped that sort of transition mentally was, whilst it hurt not to be able to go back and do the job that I really believed was what I was meant to do, but the idea of any of my mates suffering for it is what really helped put it into perspective and sort of helped made that process easier. Because the last thing I'd want to do is, be out on an operational tour and not be able to react quick enough to help my friends. So that sort of like helped me seal in my mind that the army was going to be like quite limited to me. Mentally, I 18 years old. My every teenager's driven by looks, and mine was a mess. So that hurt, knowing that I'm either going to be spending the rest of my life behind closed doors trying to hide away from everything, or just be open to the fact that I'm always going to be looked at differently. So that was quite a mental struggle to try and cope with. On one hand, I should be proud that I'd, fought, served, got injured for my country in the army. But on the other hand, all confidence that I had prior to my injury had just been completely stripped away because, at one point I thought I was invincible, but that very, very quickly came back and bit me in the ass. So I had no confidence at all. So it was quite a long period of time before I had any sort of, motivation or confidence to sort of put myself out there into the world. I knew that I needed to do something. I knew that this is the life I've got now. This is the life I need to live. And it could go one way or the other, and I'd rather have more control over my injury and my way of life than just sitting aside and rotting in a corner. So I just brought it right back down to basics. When I was first injured, I was bedbound. I lost so much muscle mass that I couldn't even walk. So right from the very start, it was just as simple as putting one foot in front of another. And that sort of stuck with me all the way through my recovery. It started from being able to stand up, taking a few steps, going for a walk around the hospital ward, and just progressing until the point where I eventually did leave hospital after 3 months. And then I'd do a little walk in the garden. And over weeks and months and years, that sort of progressed into going in on little runs. And it just kept going and going. I found that I took a lot of comfort from the sort of like, it's hard to explain. It was almost like a therapy in my mind. Just going out, going for a run, being by my own, and sort of recovering, feeling my body get stronger than what it was the day and the week before. So I kept running, and this evolved into like doing a race. And I thought in my mind, I was like, okay, if I can do something like the London Marathon, something that I'd never done before injury, then surely there is progression, there is, that scope of being able to be better than what I was. So that became a focus, and it was about 18 months, 20 months after injury, I almost forced myself to go and do the London Marathon. Not only did it help me physically and mentally, it made me realise that I can go outside, I can sort of push myself, and people can look if they want, they can stare if they want. I don't care. I've been injured. I'm out here trying to live. That became my mentality. Using running as my therapy, and after doing London Marathon, I struggled, and I didn't fail miserably. I managed to complete it, but it was like 5 hours of pure hell. It was really hot. My body can't deal with the heat anymore. But looking back on it, I really enjoyed it. I don't know if that's like the British Army mentality of enjoying really horrible, difficult, uncomfortable situations, but that's exactly what a marathon was. But I wanted to do more of them, and it just progressed, over my lifetime. That it went from 1 marathon to 10 marathons and even more. It got to a point where after the bulk of my recovery and operations had finished, so after 5 years of in and out of hospital, I really wanted to do something special for the nurses and the burns unit, the ones who'd looked after me. And I wanted, because I realised at the same time as well, the more I got out there, the confident I became, and the more out of my shell I became to be able to not fall into the corner and trying to hide away. So my plan was to travel and experience the world, and at the same time raise money for the hospital. And my idea was to run a marathon every weekend for 2 years to try and get 100 marathons. I thought this way I could travel the world, see everything, and just experience what life has to offer, because it was so very nearly taken away from me. And I've really had a great time doing that. I managed to raise a bucket load of money for the hospital, see the world, and I really think that sort of put me in such a position today that my injury, it just happened. It didn't matter that it happened, because I'm here. Life goes on. Don't get me wrong, it never was easy to sort of force myself out into the world to try and overcome that sort of fear of being stared at because of the way I look, or that wasn't easy. But along the way, something clicked that progression is the best for health, physically and mentally. If you can do something positive and progress forward, such as one step in front of the other, you're going in the right direction. And it sort of clicked in my mind that inside your little comfort zone, inside your little bubble, there's very, very little room for progression. And I knew that I needed to step outside that sort of comfort zone to be able to progress, to make myself better, physically and mentally. So it was that understanding and that realisation that I do need to put myself in some pretty uncomfortable situations to be able to move forward. And sometimes situations were uncomfortable and they weren't great, but other times, you soon learn and you soon realise that it's not that scary. At that moment in time when I really, really believed that I was going to die, it made me feel that I really didn't. I really don't want to die. Yeah, but now looking back on it, I appreciate death's a part of life. But if anything, it just makes me want to fit as much as I can into life while I still have it. Being in the warrior, on fire and no control, what actually clicked in my head, knowing that I needed to get out. It's something that I've thought about, well, my entire life really, because that one single change of mindset is the reason why I'm still here now. But it's really hard because it feels like that's what pulled me away from dying. How can anyone rationally think why anything happens, the very moment you're about to die? And I think it's just comes down to very basic human instinct of survival.